One by one, the frozen processes were being forced closed, and the system would shut down any second. This would shut down Morton, too. The death would be painful, as likely his sword and armor would be turned off to preserve his core. Then he would be vulnerable and likely killed as he powered down simultaneously. With dexterity failing, Morton tripped over a bad piece of code as he was trying to make his way to a wall, and the virus took the opportunity to pile on him. They pulled his sword away, and it disintegrated as he gasped for breath. All he could hear was the numbers counting down to the system shutdown.
System shutdown in 20 seconds. Please save and log out immediately to not lose your data.
Morton reached his hand out in desperation, not knowing what else to do. A second later, Vanquisher burst through the small opening remaining from the internet door in a flash, and the exit as the internet closed. The exit was Vanquisher's only way of being free, but it seemed to have other plans. The green and red shiny Kieran landed next to Morton hard, sending over 20 bad pieces of code flying and disintegrating at the same time in dramatic slow motion. In the same motion, Vanquisher turned back into his electrical bolt of energy, combining with Morton. With moments to spare, Vanquisher whisked Morton to the entrance back to their machine in the hallway. They got inside the hall as fast as they could, but the door wouldn't shut at all. This must be part of the maintenance also, Morton thought grimly. The little virus programs reorganized and began heading his way, but Morton no longer had his shield and sword applets. The viruses had eaten and corrupted them. Trying as he might, they wouldn't load. He ran down the long hallway as he began to lag and skip, the timer still counting down in the hallway as well. Morton got to the door, and it was completely spider-webbed up, with Blister sitting on it, quite content with its spider self. Morton gasped, and Blister gasped, and Morton grabbed Blister and ripped the door open and jumped inside. Blister put a sticky web on Morton, then bounded off, remaining tethered to him. Blister grabbed something in time for the web to reach its stretching limit and slingshotting the spider through the exit in parallel with Vanquisher zapping in. Morton slammed the door shut and was back in his own system with Blister and Vanquisher, as safe and sound as they could be for the moment. Back to the grind. Walden's system, evening, day 1. The door dematerialized behind Morton as he looked across his vast, valley-wide system. He felt his connection to his home system reconnect, but it felt wrong. He tried to pull up a new sword and shield again, but they were corrupted somehow. Instead of being bright and shiny, they were dull purple-black with corrosive bits of code dripping off. Morton threw them on the ground quick, and they dissolved back to where they came from. Morton looked at his hands and saw some of the code had got on him. He flicked his hands on the ground, and it slid off of him onto the ground of the virtual construct. With all the shaking around to get the yucky code off, Morton forgot all along that Blister had been on him somewhere. Hopefully Blister was okay. Morton heard peeping in his ear and looked to his shoulder to see Blister was in fact not a boy spider, but a girl spider. On her back was an egg sac that she had lashed to herself with webbing like a little backpack. The sack, too, had the security company's logo on it, so Morton didn't think spiderling and egg sac could be very harmful if they stayed here. Morton surveyed the virtual landscape, which was now over 70% infected with this virus. He began to think he recognized the virus now, a space filler virus. It would take over every single empty space in the system to make sure there was no way Walden could get his work done, and no way Morton could ever hope to clean it up. This would get Walden in a lot of trouble, and would get Morton's system reformatted for sure. That would mean Morton would be gone, replaced with a new image of his antivirus software. Morton wasn't about to fail his mission, though. He focused all of his energy to thinking about a solution as hard as he could. The consequences of failure would be dire. It might even mean that Walden could lose his job if he got blamed. Morton had never had another user use his system full-time, but he did not like the thought of that one bit. Morton needed to make sure Walden's system would be okay. If only there was some way that I had a backup command center somewhere, Morton thought. Peaceful retreat, later evening, day 1. Vanquisher seemed to perk up, and the three zipped off to the outer edge of the hard drive, the last place that the virus could get to given its current pattern. When Morton rematerialized, he was at a fancy horse stable. Morton took a double take, as Vanquisher was already 20 yards away rolling around in the grass like he was a baby animal. "I guess this is your home, huh?" Morton asked, but got no response. Morton walked around and didn't notice Blister make herself a little parachute and jump off. The virtual wind from Data moving around blew Blister into a barn where the environment was quiet, peaceful, and dark. Morton walked by the barn, not paying it much attention. He turned a corner and saw what looked like a Tibetan monastery and some monks meditating. Next to them appeared to be a set of Falun Gong also meditating. One side was red and one side was yellow. Sort of like Vanquisher, Morton thought, and then walked up to the shrine. Morton got up to the shrine and turned around to survey, even though they were very far out. At the current rate, the virus would make it here and consume this peaceful place by next morning. Morton pulled up his task manager and saw the system hadn't been reactivated by Walden after his apparent rest break. Morton hoped nothing bad had happened to Walden. Maybe it's just a long meeting and then he went home, Morton thought. He certainly hadn't got an email about a fire drill or anything to explain the sudden vacancy. There was a place to sit down at the shrine, so Morton sat down, and something poked him in the leg. Ow, Morton thought, and then remembered the umbrella girl touching his leg. Morton blushed again and pulled out what was in his pocket. It was a compact, the thing girls use to put powder on themselves or to look at themselves in the mirror. The shiny small clamshell container had a little umbrella logo on top of it that matched the umbrella she had. Morton thought that was weird. Morton bravely opened the compact and saw himself in the mirror. He hadn't rested in a long time. He looked tired and he looked dirty, like he'd been in a war. Morton shut his disintegrating armor applet off to repair and relaxed, realizing how tired he was. He was so slow and tired. This area was refreshing, but it was only a small portion of the energy he was used to. With all of the CPUs the system had, there was special memory for the CPU that was a special level of cache that went at hyperspeeds. Morton didn't know how fast, but it was fast, but now it felt almost all used up. Walden had personally requested all of these components himself. The system had way more memory than you'd actually need in a system. Not the top-of-the-line CPUs, but close. Also had special cache for the CPUs, which made them run super fast and efficient. The CPU cores themselves were the top of the last gen, but with more threads than the average current gen. So the single-core processor was slower, but multitasking was significantly superior. They wouldn't let Walden get a solid-state drive, though. Morton figured it was due to insurance covering potential data loss. Everything was saved on the server, though. Wouldn't people rather have faster data access? But oh well. It didn't matter to Morton. He got to move as fast as he wanted through the system anyway, as everything was generally loaded into memory, but the data moved really slow. That was because the hard drive was mechanical and had no cache of its own. He had to wait all the time, but now that he thought of it, it's probably what was slowing down this awful virus. He stared in the mirror some more, not really knowing what to do, having exhausted every resource. The global knowledge base had no way of getting a hold of him to answer his question about the data snippet. Morton had never really looked at a compact applet before and decided to inspect it. He turned it left and right and accidentally turned it upside down. Something fell out onto the stone floor of the shrine. This startled Morton, and he immediately went to pick it up, embarrassed that he'd maybe disrupted the meditation time of the spiritual and peaceful people that were here. He looked around and nobody flinched. The compact applet must have had a secret place for embedded data. The item that was dropped was a miniature floppy disk with a shiny compact disk inside. Oh, compact disk. Morton cracked himself up at the double entendre. Morton held it around and rotated it and didn't know what to do with it and went to set it on the altar. When he went to do that, a tray opened up out of the stone that looked like it would fit the disk. Morton put the compact back in his pocket and put the disk in the tray. The disk closed, and people that had been meditating all started peacefully monk chanting. It was a language that Morton didn't understand. It was all just data to him. It seemed harmless enough, though. He began to monitor the data transferring, with his measuring equipment feeding into the tablet. Morton felt a portion of himself get shoved out of the way in every portion of memory on the computer as this new program began to compile. He got out of the way and let the program compile, and he looked out across the virtual landscape, and the virus had occupied almost every available spot. That essentially nearly filled up the entire hard drive with whatever this program was. The invading program started to slow down its replication, and Morton felt drained also. It had been so long since he had rested. He felt scrunched up like he was being lowered in priority. Morton really needed to rest and let this program run. Whether the invading program's feed had slowed down or whether the program given to him by the Umbrella Girl was responsible, Morton knew he had to take a break. It seemed like the only chance he would get, so he went to the antechamber adjacent to the altar, and a blanket appeared in his hand, and he laid down as a pillow appeared under his head. The therapeutic chanting increased, and the virus's replication and feed from the now corrupted radio tower slowed.